Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome once again to Chatham Community Church. My name is Jaime. I'm one of the pastors here, and let me just add my words of celebration on this day for all the mothers, grandmothers, aunts, cousins, older sisters, friends who have played a role in shaping us. So thank you. We celebrate you. I know that this day is hard for many people as well for lots of reasons. I just want to acknowledge that and say that we're going to pray at the end of the service. As part of the end of the service, we'll pray a prayer that acknowledges and brings all of that before the Lord. So if today is a hard day for you, just know that you're seen, and we'll bring that before the Lord before the end of the service. If you happen to be a guest, welcome. It's a great day to be here. I'm glad you're here with us. At the end of the service, I'm going to be just outside the doors. Come say hi. I'd love to hear your name, how you found us, and what your experience was like this morning. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to sit with more than several couples who are either who are engaged and close to their wedding day. And usually these conversations will involve talking about the wedding day and what to expect. A lot of times I'm either officiating the wedding or taking part in the ceremony, so we're walking through that. But I don't know if it's because of my position or because I'm a little bit older than these people. Most of the time they want to hear a little bit about what married life is like. And, I've been to trainings over the years, and I've seen lists. I've tried to sort of equip myself to be good in those conversations. And either at one of those trainings or on some list of questions, I saw a question that I picked up. It's just sort of stuck with me, and I tend to ask it in these conversations. And most of the time, it's helped spark really fruitful and necessary conversation. So I'll try to insert this in the conversations that I have with them, and that is, how are you going to spend, insert upcoming family-connected holiday? So sometimes that is, how are you going to spend Mother's Day? Or how are you going to spend this Christmas? Or how are you going to spend Thanksgiving? See, holidays, like the one we are celebrating today, are a beautiful and sometimes messy mix of family traditions, expectations, obligations, responsibilities, and sometimes even demands. And these couples now have to figure out how to manage that, not just from their family, but from their spouse's family, and the expectations that they want to create as a new emerging family as well. They need to figure out what they're going to give their yes to moving forward, and how they are going to communicate their no's. Because there are going to have to be no's, as sort of now, instead of just one, there are now 3 sets of expectations to manage. They're going to have to figure out how to communicate their no's, especially to people who assume that they are going to get a yes. Now, sometimes that goes beautifully. Some people are shocked by how beautifully it goes, and new traditions emerge. But sometimes it can get messy. I mean, family, am I right? In case you weren't here with us last week, we're in the 2nd week of our series, My Messy, Beautiful Family. If we took a poll of this room, it's likely most of us would say that we have some sort of family issue or family dynamic that we're trying to engage with or work through, something we have questions about or are struggling with. Maybe there's a political issue that has created a wedge between us and some of our family members. Maybe we have a loved one who seems to be going off the rails and we're not sure what to do, how to help them, or what the right response is. Or for some of us, it's concerns about what to do with an aging parent who now needs some additional care, and we're not sure how to offer it, or what they might receive, or how to help them along. Some of us have strained relationships with siblings, or parents, or cousins, or even children. Some of us are just trying to figure out what to do with the stuff that happened to us as we were children, because the older we get, the more we realize, even if it was small and happened long ago, it's had a big role in shaping who we've become, and we want to be free of some of those things. Family can be messy. But it's also true that a number of us can point to our families as the source of some of the best of what we have, and some of the best of who we are. These people taught us, they modeled for us, they encouraged us, and still, in some cases, contribute great things to our lives and to who we are becoming. And there's beauty in that. Yes, family can be messy, and family can be beautiful also. Some of us have a mix of both. Some of us, our experience was slanted more in one direction than the other. What's true of all of us is that none of us can say that our families were or are perfect. So for the next few weeks, we're going to look at a series of scriptures. And from those scriptures, we're going to draw out some principles and practical applications for how we might recognize and appreciate whatever is good or whatever was good in our family. And we're going to deal with some of the hard stuff. Things like boundaries or forgiveness or how to break family cycles of sin and brokenness. The hope is that throughout these weeks, we'll do some good work. We'll do some good work with God, and we'll do some good work in our relationships, and that we'll invite the Holy Spirit to do some good work in us. I said this last week, and I'll say it again. Some of it is going to feel hard. Some of it is going to feel risky. So I'll front load an invitation that I will give at the end of the sermon. We have people who are here to pray for you throughout this series. At any moment where you feel like it's getting hard or it's feeling risky, go stand before the Lord with someone alongside you. Let them help you through it in prayer. Last week, we started by laying the necessary foundation to engage with the risky, engage with the hard, and for some of us to free us to be able to appreciate the beautiful that's there. We laid this foundation that says that Jesus invites us into God's family, and that trusting in him makes us God's children. We are welcomed into a new kind of family. So regardless of what your family of origin might be like, whether it was beautiful, whether it was messy, whether it was a mix of both, whether it was so horrible that you want to have nothing to do with it, regardless of the state of health of your current family, whether it's good or not good, there is a truth that can apply to each and every one of us in this room, and that is that God welcomes us into his family. And that family, being welcomed into that family, gives us not just a strong, but a stable and consistent place from which to do whatever work we need to do with regards to our family. Whether it's a work that gives us eyes to see and appreciate the beauty, or the work that invites us to confront the hard stuff and bring healing and freedom from it. So I want to invite you again, like I did last week, to consider whether you are in this family. If you have not yet become part of the family of God, let me tell you, family is beautiful, family is messy, and having a strong, stable place from which to engage those things is freeing and liberating, because it means we are never at risk of being abandoned, of being left without home. We always, in the family of God, have a place and people to come to that is stable, that is strong, and that lasts. So if you've not yet made that decision, today is a great day to enter into the family of God. Today we're going to look at two passages that involve Jesus and his family. We'll see Jesus giving his yes, doing something that a family member has requested of him, something that he initially resists. But we'll also see him turning a request down in what feels like a very high stakes moment. In both situations, what guides both his yes and his no has everything to do with his connection to God the Father. That connection has established the guidelines that shape every relationship that he has, including his relationship with his family. Another way to say this is that his connection to God the Father has shaped how he sets his boundaries. And in that, there's something for us. Our connection to God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, can shape how we set boundaries in our relationships, particularly in our relationships with our families. And here's the principle for today. Faith-fueled boundaries help us love and honor our families, both with our yeses and with our nos. There are loving and honoring yeses that we can and ought to give to our families. And there are loving and honoring nos that we need to give as well. Some of us grew up being taught that you always say yes to family. Maybe it wasn't phrased in that way, but you grew up knowing that if the family says it, if the family asks it, if it's for the family, you don't say no. Some of that was good, but but sometimes it put us in really hard spots and cost us quite a bit. So even the idea of boundaries connected to our families feels almost unloving and dishonoring. Others of us are on the opposite end. We don't have boundaries of no, we have walls of no. Packed with barbed wire, electrified when it comes to family. For both, the invitation today is to reconsider. To reconsider whether there might be some adjusting that needs to happen. And for those of us who are in between, who know that there are sometimes that there's yes and sometimes there's saying no, I want to invite you to, in the passage, reflect in the passages that we're going to look at today. Reflect and see if there might be any of those yeses, any of those nos that need to be recalibrated. To align more with what God wants for us in our lives and in our relationships with our families. Colleen read for us the passage from John 2, where Jesus is at a wedding in Cana. His mother is there as well as some of his disciples. Now, even though at this point Jesus clearly has some disciples, because the passage names that they're there with him, he is not likely widely known yet. He's probably right at the start of what becomes known as his public ministry. More than likely, he's not yet known as a miracle worker. He's probably gone around teaching a little bit. He's clearly developed some sort of following, but maybe he's not known beyond a particular region. He doesn't seem to be a guest of honor at this wedding. He's likely just there because there's some sort of connection between his family and the people who are hosting the wedding. Weddings were significant cultural moments in the ancient world. They were long-lasting festivities. They lasted for days. And in a culture that valued hospitality like that first century culture did, it is really important to provide for your guests. If you are going to invite people and you are going to make something last many days, you better be sure that there's going to be stuff for every day at every time for every person. There would be great shame if you ran out of anything. If all of a sudden you didn't have to provide. And this isn't just you invited one couple over for dinner and you forgot to wash the dishes so we're all eating from paper plates. This is the village. This is tons of people figuring out, oh no, we've got another day to go and you have nothing left to give us? Some of you are cringing in horror. Cringing in horror. That the wine has run out before the festivities are over is not just an invitation to drink Sprite. Even if you need to obey your thirst. No. It's a big deal. It's a big deal that the wine has run out. And Mary becomes aware of this. Mary becomes aware of what's at stake and she approaches Jesus. And all the text records are saying to Jesus is, they have no more wine. And on the surface, that sounds like just a statement of fact. Just a piece of information. But many of us have been on the receiving end of statements of fact and pieces of information like that. In fact, some of us have been the communicators of pieces of information and statements of fact like that. And we all know that that's not just a statement of fact or a piece of information. We know what's going on there. Behind the statement is a request. And the request is this. Can you do something about this? Would you do something about this? Jesus' mom has been aware of the type of person Jesus is before Jesus was born. She's been aware of what he's been sent to earth to do. She's been aware of the potential impact he is going to have, and she has been treasuring hopes, dreams, longings, and aspirations for his life for decades now. She seems to care about the people who are hosting this wedding, and she doesn't want them to experience the shame that's coming should word get out that they've run out of wine. She's got good intentions, and she has a sense that Jesus can do something about this. So she brings this request to him. Perhaps, she reasons, it's time. Perhaps it's time to start the next leg of the journey. Perhaps it's time for the dreams, the longings, the aspirations, the hopes that she'd heard about to become reality. Perhaps it's time for him to reveal himself. Jesus doesn't seem to agree. He responds to her by saying, "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." Now, for some of us, we see that and we're like, dude, that's your mama. You don't call her woman. So let me just clarify, in the original language, there is no disrespect communicated by that term. I don't understand that, but this is what the commentators tell us. There's no disrespect in the original language from the term woman. But in the response he gives her, he's naming a boundary, what we would call a boundary. He's not going to do the kinds of things that would reveal him as the Messiah until it's time. Until he feels it's time. And he doesn't think the time is now. Now, it's already clear that Mary does not agree with him. So how is she going to respond? Well, no, she doesn't say anything else to him. She goes to the servants and she says, do whatever he tells you. Here's what she doesn't do. She doesn't argue. She doesn't persist. She doesn't insist. She doesn't go to the master of the banquet or to the host family and reveal the problem and put Jesus on the spot. She doesn't go and say, hey, your wine has run out, but guess what? Jesus can do something about that. That would force the issue. That would force his hand, but it would violate the boundary. So she doesn't do that. She also doesn't guilt him. She said her piece. She's made him aware of what she thinks, and then she entrusts the decision of what to do about that to him. And she helps prepare the way in case he's willing to do something. She tells the servants, in case he's willing to do something, do whatever he tells you. She prepares the way. Again, she seems to have a strong sense that it's time. Now she happens to be right. Though he initially resists, Jesus ultimately does what his mother asks of him. And it was the right time. So the lesson here must certainly be, your mom knows best, do what she tells you. And all the moms are like, all right, we're done, it's over, let's go. Pray the blessing of you too, this is good. Right? Because Jesus does that, right? So clearly, this must be the principle. Well, not exactly. But it's important to consider something here. It's important to consider that at their best, our elders have perspective, they have experience, they have wisdom, and they have insight that is worth listening to. And listening to that might tip us from a place in which we feel it's a no to a place where it's actually time to give our yes. So it's worth listening. Now, I do want to draw one additional principle for the sake of how we set boundaries in relationships. As I said earlier, Mary doesn't use guilt to get her way with Jesus, but she could have. Some of us know guilt is an effective tool at getting people to do things. Guilt is an effective tool. But here's the thing, folks. Guilt and shame may get you your way today, but they will cost you trust and relationship today, tomorrow, and every day beyond. And some of us know that deep inside because we have done things or are in relationships where we are accustomed to being guilted. And we know that we acquiesce, but we know that trust is severed. We know that the relationship is not as intimate or as warm as it could be. And when we've used guilt, we felt the sting. We felt the ickiness of it. Because it may win us the day, but we know it cost us something that in other circumstances we would not be willing to pay. I heard someone say once, when you use these types of things, you may win the battle for the behavior, but you'll lose the battle for the heart. And we've got to decide what's more important, especially as it pertains to our relationships with our families. So here's a boundary I want to invite us to set. Refuse to use or to respond to guilt and shame. This is hard because it's easy. It's hard because it's effective. It gets you your way. But there are higher aspirations here, folks. There's a better way. There's a longer game to play, if you will. Yeses and nos that are motivated by guilt and shame are not faith-fueled. They're not an exercise of love, and they're not an exercise of honor for our families. They erode the health of every family. Think about it. When have you ever felt loved when someone has used guilt or shame to motivate you? When have you ever felt seen or honored when someone chose to use guilt or shame to motivate you? I can promise you, if you've used those things, the people you used them on didn't feel loved or honored either. And love and honor are one of the cornerstones of healthy relationships and healthy families. So right now, would you commit with me to refuse to use or respond to guilt and shame? It may take some time to figure out other ways, but it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. Mary doesn't need to use guilt or shame. It would seem that in her relationship with Jesus, there is a bedrock of trust, a bedrock of love, a bedrock of respect, which frees her to ask. It frees her to nudge. It frees her to trust. And it frees him to listen and reconsider. And he goes from a no to a yes. And it turns out to be the right decision. Now, we said at the beginning that no family is perfect. And even though in this passage, Mary gets it exceptionally right. Exceptionally right. And she helps Jesus inaugurate a new stage in his ministry and in his time on earth. She doesn't always get it right. So let me just say, before we read the passage where we see Mary get it catastrophically wrong, the expectation that any of us are going to be perfect members of our family is ludicrous. Some of us here are ladled with guilt and shame because we weren't perfect or aren't perfect mothers, daughters, sons, fathers, cousins, brothers, whatever. I don't know who set that bar for you. I don't know if you set it for yourself. But let me say, you are freed in Christ from that expectation. You cannot achieve it. You cannot achieve it. You will mess up. You will get it wrong this side of heaven. Don't let that stop you from trying to love and honor the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Don't let the guilt and shame of not being perfect keep you from exercising love and honor. Keep you from setting healthy boundaries. We're going to look at a passage that feels somewhat opposite to this one in how the family interacts. So if you have a Bible, we're going to be in Mark chapter 3. And as you look for this, let me give you some of the context. Jesus, at this point, has been going around the region. He's expanded his territory. And he's doing some teaching, but he's also performing miracles. He's attracting a bigger following, and he is ruffling some feathers. With both his teaching and what he's doing and how he's going about it, people are starting not just to notice, but to be concerned. People are starting to be a little bothered by Jesus. Now, during this time, his family doesn't seem to be with him. They seem to have stayed in their home village. So we're going to pick up the story in verse 20 of chapter 3 of Mark. Here's what it says. Then Jesus entered a house. And again, a crowd gathered so that he and the disciples were not even able to eat. And the connotation there is that the stuff was so busy that they didn't have time to sit down for a meal. When his family heard about this, they went out to take charge of him, for they said he is out of his mind. And so the family sets out, and the camera zooms back to where Jesus is, and Jesus is doing some teaching, and that teaching is getting heated. He's having some confrontations with teachers of the law, and then this happens. Jumping down to verse 31. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." What makes this family interaction so different from the one at the wedding? The passage starts by telling us that Jesus has entered a house to teach. And when his family hears that he's entered a house to teach, they resolve to go and take charge of him because they say that he is out of his mind. Where do they get that idea? Where do they get that idea that he is out of his mind? Certainly not by someone coming to tell them Jesus is teaching. Jesus has taught before. Certainly not by this idea that Jesus is gathering a flock. Jesus has had people following him already. I wonder if what's happened is that now that he's expanded his territory, gone beyond where his family is, and his family is not tagging along with him, now that he's itinerant and they've stayed home, they've not seen him in a while. And all they have is the word that is spreading about him. All they have are the stories that are getting back to them. Maybe some of that they're catching just in conversations in the village, but maybe people are coming to their house to talk to them about what they perceive about Jesus. What kind of stories do you think are being brought to Jesus, to Jesus' family about him, that would make them think something like this about Jesus? That would make them feel like they need to take charge of him. Maybe there's stories that say he's causing problems. He's contradicting the law. He's doing things on the Sabbath that he shouldn't do. Now, the mistake they make is not hearing these reports. That's not the mistake. The mistake is that they seem to build their conclusions only on what they have heard. And they don't factor in what they know about Jesus. They don't factor in what they've seen. They don't seem to factor in who they know him to be. Their brother, their son. Mary doesn't seem to factor in what she's heard. The prophecies, the things that she's been treasuring in her heart. And that can be incredibly damaging. The kinds of things they seem to be hearing about Jesus might weigh on the family. Maybe it makes them look bad. Maybe it shines poorly on the family name. I wonder if they act in this passage mostly to protect the family name more than out of love for a family member. Maybe you've had that sort of experience where you've seen people in your family act to protect the family name or the family reputation more than out of love for a family member. If they've done that, that's another mistake. If you've experienced that, you've been on the other side of family doing that, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's not how it ought to have been. Lastly, a mistake they make is that they try to exert power in unhealthy ways. They want to take charge of Jesus. They move to control. They move to restrict his agency. By having themselves announced from the outside, your mother and brother are looking for you. They are trying to leverage cultural and religious expectation and pressure, right? There's this verse, honor your father and your mother, to get Jesus to comply. Because what are these people going to think if Jesus doesn't do in that moment the thing his mother is asking him to? It's manipulative. It's completely out of step with how things operate in God's family and how things operate in healthy relationships. It is a violation of any sense of health, of any sense of goodness that could be in a relationship. It's a violation of any sort of healthy boundaries that might be there. And for that very reason, Jesus responds in the way he does. Where are my mother and my brothers? He looks around, he says, these are my mothers, my brothers, my sisters. Whoever does the will of the Father. He basically says, I'll respond to family requests that come from people who, whether they realize it or not, are asking for things that are in step with God's will for my life and God's will for our world. He sets a clear boundary. You don't get to pull the family card if it pulls me away from God's will for my life and for our world. That's been his boundary always, but he asserts it here. It's a clear no, but it's one that's fueled by faith and his commitment to God. And here's the thing, we know how things turn out for Jesus' family. This is not the final chapter in his relationship with them. We know that it bears good fruit. We know that this no honors and loves his family, because ultimately it contributes to a healthy relationship. Faith-fueled boundaries sometimes lead us to say a no that serves a greater yes that we give to God and God's work. I knew someone who came from a family who had this sort of philosophy that you had to protect the family image. And in order to protect the family image, if it was necessary, you had to bend the truth. You had to lie. Because if anything was going to make the family look back or contradict something another family member said, even if it wasn't true, you wouldn't. You would say the thing that would protect the family image. And then this person became a follower of Jesus. And there's this pesky thing that you learn when you become a follower of Jesus. And that is that lying does not contribute anything good to our world. There's this commitment to truth. And there was incredible conflict the first time this person was hearing a story and the family member was telling the story and said, right, so-and-so? And the person said, actually, no, that's not what happened. That's not true. Because they shattered the family image publicly. But this person held that line. He said, listen, I have a commitment to God. You don't have to involve me in the lies that you're telling or the stories you're telling. I understand that, but I can't participate in that. I will love you. I will honor you. But if you put me on the spot, I'm going to tell the truth. And if people ask me, I will not lie. I will not lie. It was hard. It was hard. But ultimately, it's led to better things in their family. Some people are still committed to the value, but some people have turned the corner. And now the family is living more authentically into who they are. The beautiful and the messy. And the messy. Faith-fueled boundaries can sometimes lead us to give a no that serves God's greater yes. His work in us, His work in our world, His work in our relationships, and ultimately, that bears better fruit. Bears good fruit. Now, it feels like this is the kind of thing that would fracture a family, what Jesus does. But here's what we know. Jesus' mother is at the cross. She is there with him at the very, very end. And Jesus' brother James is one of the early leaders of the church, a key leader, a pivotal leader in the church. So the no that Jesus gives bears good fruit. The no that we may have to give might feel risky, might feel painful, might feel scary, and it might be that in the moment, but it will bear good fruit if it's aligned with God's yes for your life. So here's the question. In light of your yes to God, is there a faith-filled boundary to set in how you relate to your family? Is there a no that you know you need to give, but you've been unwilling to because you've been unwilling to risk? I'm not telling you that it's not justified, that you feel that it's risky. It likely is. It likely is. But when it serves God's greater yes, it will ultimately bear better fruit. Sometimes the choice is as stark as saying, do you want to give the easy yes and have your family be in the state of health or unhealth that it currently is? Or do you want to risk the no for the sake of future better health? Maybe even surprisingly in the moment, we don't know. Again, not easy. Not saying there isn't going to be pain, but remember, we stand on the solid ground of the family that doesn't abandon us, the family where we are safe, the solid ground, the strong ground of the family of God. I said we would do hard work this series. So again, in light of your yes to God, is there a faith-fueled boundary that you need to set? Is there a no that you need to give? It's time. I want to leave us with an image to reflect on and some principles that are connected to boundaries. In our solar system, the planets orbit around the sun, which is at the center. Do you know what keeps them in orbit? Does anyone know what keeps the planets orbiting? Yeah, the sun's gravitational pull. People often ask me, how do I order my priorities in our life? And when they think of that, they're thinking of lists. And they're like, well, I'm a Christian now, so clearly God is first. But does that mean family comes second? Does that mean something else comes third? Long ago, I found this image to be far more helpful in how to order my life, set my priorities, clarify my boundaries. Because I imagine that in the universe that is my life, my priorities, my relationships, Jesus is at the center. Jesus is at the center. He's not something I check off and then don't need to tend to. He is the one that holds all my worlds together. All my life together. And what I want is every aspect of my life to be shaped by His pull, by His influence. Now, I'm going to stretch the analogy a little bit. but that's okay because that's what analogies do. They break down at some point. I like to think of the rings as the thing I need to attend to next. And the closer you are to the center, the more I need to attend to. And so the way I like to imagine this is that sometimes Jesus pulls some things closer to the center for me to attend to them now, and they need more of my yes. And sometimes they get pushed out a little further out, and it's okay to say no because something else needs to get my yes. It's not about listing and finishing things, because let's be honest, if we create checklists, we get stuck at one. We're never done with God. God's never done with us. If we skip it and say, all right, I did enough, I'm going to go to number 2, we're never done with family. But there's a dynamic of when we give yes or when we give no that gets shaped by God's influence in our life, in our relationships. Let Jesus shape the gravitational pull, your priorities, your boundaries. Here's a couple of principles. See if any are for you today. 1, boundaries help stop the least healthy people from dictating the terms of the relationship. There are people in our life who are in crisis. There are people in our life who are engaging in unhealthy practices. There are people in our life who will take as much as they can get, and they will use guilt as long as they can, or they will simply consume as much airspace and attention as is available unless you set a boundary. A boundary simply removes them from the place of control, and it affirms agency. Some of us are in relationships with family people who are in bad spots, and they seem to control every aspect in our life. Why would we want the people who seem to be the least in control of their life and of their understanding and of their sense to control ours, or to dictate the terms in our relationships? It is a gift to remove them from that spot, because they can't handle being in control of the relationships. They certainly can't handle it in a way that brings health. Jesus' family was out of whack in that second passage. They were trying to control the dynamic of the relationship, and Jesus' boundary took them out of that spot. It kept them from running the show when they were in a really bad spot. Second one, boundaries may need to shift dramatically at critical moments of change. Attend to them. Here are 2 spots that I find consistently are hard spots to understand boundaries and when boundaries need to be revisited. One is when children transition from children to adults. Be very clear, when children are children, adults get to set lots of the boundaries. It's a healthy developmental process to let children begin to set boundaries as they grow, but there comes a point when they cross into adulthood where something shifts. And lots of parents have a hard time letting their kids act as the adults that they develop them to be, because they don't revisit the boundaries. And they don't acknowledge that now the adult child actually is empowered to set their own boundaries and has freedom to set their own boundaries. The other one is when parents need care. You know, one of the hardest conversations, but freeing conversations that I had to have with my mom was, Mom, I'm your only child. You are this old. Things are happening. I'm like thousands of miles away from you. I need to know what's going on. I need to know how you're doing, because I'm the one who's going to have to come down and do something if something happens. It's a shift. She used to protect me. She wouldn't tell me what was going on with her health-wise. But now she does. It's been freeing. It was a hard moment because she had to realize, oh, yes, the dynamic in our relationship has changed. We need to redefine the boundaries. But it's been freeing and a blessing for our relationship. Another one. Healthy boundaries can sometimes feel hurtful to the people affected, but they hurt more when they aren't communicated. The worst thing you can do is set a boundary and manage around the person, instead of talking to them and telling them, hey, this is what I need in the relationship right now. Because at some point they will find out and they will feel like you couldn't trust them. And the relationship has changed. They still may hurt when you tell them, but they will hurt more if they find out later on. The last one. In most cases, you can't set or reset boundaries for others. I said in most cases because we talked about kids and then sometimes aging adults need us to set boundaries for them. In most cases, you can't reset boundaries for other people. And there are people in our lives who are going to set boundaries that are actually not good, not healthy, not conducive to a good relationship. You can't reset boundaries for most other people, but you can communicate your concerns for them. And then beyond that, pray and ask for God's intervention. Pray and ask for God's intervention. So here's the encouragement today. Invite Jesus to help you find the boundaries that will build a healthy you, that will build a healthy family relationship. Let's pray. God, thank you that we can have these hard conversations about boundaries, that we can explore the areas where you're nudging us to give a yes, and explore the areas where you're inviting us to give a no. Out of a sense that even if it's risky, even if it's costly, even if there's some pain, we are never without a family that loves us. We are never without a home. Lord, some of us don't have vision to see how it might be possible that some of these yeses and some of these nos might actually be good for our families. If you can't give us vision for it now, give us faith that it's there. Give us hope that that good is there, that we may walk into your yes, into your purpose, and align our relationships in that. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you stand and worship?